So I just watched this video and I knew it would probably be full of propaganda BS, but I just figured I'd give it a shot just in case. Just in case, because I do know the KGW's The Story is actually something I have found myself really liking because it, most of the time, is actually coming off very honestly. It's not pushing you either direction and they're not necessarily concluding either direction, right? And they're actually talking to the people in question or groups in question alongside of just everyday people. This I didn't even know existed. It already, and you're gonna see this real quickly here. The start to this is very specific. It's like it's just part of the propaganda. You can tell, and you just observe. You can notice the real facts and reality that they won't sell and tell you. Watching them tell one thing and say one thing about the climate, or in this case, the fire weather forecast for this year, 2024, in the Northwest, versus what they're now saying. Can things change? Yes. But there's a huge problem because the NOAA, also often known as NOAA, which is the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, one of the, if not the leading organization in North America, let alone in the United States, that nations around the world follow to get their weather from. In fact, especially if you spend any time on a ship or at sea, you know, and even in the air actually, you know that you actually will go not to the National Weather Service or to any weather place, meteorological place, you go to the NOAA for your forecast. Here's what's funny about that. They released, alongside the National Weather Service, of course they work together a lot, up into literally yesterday, the 19th of May, they had been consistently pushing out that this year, the fire season, not just in Oregon, but in the Northwest in general, would be mild compared to last year. And in fact, compared to the last few years, which is good to hear. However, this, what we're about to review, is pushing the complete opposite narrative. It's literally not even 24 hours after all of this, from the NOAA and National Weather Service, the NWS, that now they're trying to claim the opposite. Watch how the propaganda works to get you into believing all sorts of BS things.
Our Environment Northwest team is bringing you in-depth reports on our wildfire risk, smoke dangers, and what it takes to recover after the flames are out. We'll have stories all week from across Oregon and Washington, taking a look at what increases that fire risk and the solutions being worked on now. Tonight, Spokane meteorologist Jeremy Legoo explains why this wildfire season will likely be an active one for Washington, increasing the potential for smoke throughout the Northwest. After that, we'll hear from KGW's chief meteorologist Matt Zaffino with a closer look at the risk to Oregon. First, Jeremy.
We were driving up and over the mountain pass, and then on the side of the road were two logs still smoldering, to the point that when I pulled them out into the road, they started back on fire, completely unattended. Nobody in sight, and we haven't seen anyone in a very long time. This is how wildfires start.
This is not how a wildfire starts. Why? Because it's not a wild cause. It's a human cause. Humans causing wildfires, if you think about it, makes zero sense because it is not at all a wild cause. It's not just it started itself via weather or via, again, something volcanic. It was exclusively via this one of these things that you're looking at, that you're listening to, right? It's one of us. Because this is a campfire that somebody just supposedly left smoldering. I find it hilarious that they conveniently, just in time for this presentation of theirs, that all of a sudden they've conveniently come across this just casually driving up this forestry road. And it just conveniently also happens to be just enough with smoldering in the middle of the road. It could have been legit, but I highly doubt it was. But the point is, again, that's the first major lie that they keep pushing. And you notice it's not just obviously in this, and not just throughout this, they actually do this all the time. If you're from the West Coast especially, you know and understand this if you just think back through the years. What do they keep saying? They keep calling human-caused fires wildfires. If it's only about because it spreads through the forest or it spreads across some landscapes that are considered rural or wild, that makes it a wildfire, then you could literally consider so many fires within cities and metropolitan areas to technically be considered officially wildfires. Because whether it's because of arson or an electrical short or whatever the heck it is, right? If it starts in some building or in a trailer, let's say, and it spreads to a tree, which then spreads to maybe a couple of other trees and maybe some neighboring buildings, right? Okay, cool. But it also technically travels to another piece of land adjacent. By this definition, that means it's technically now considered a wildfire, which doesn't make any sense. So no, that is not a wildfire. Either call it a human fire or call it a human-caused fire, because it is not a wildfire. That is the lie. And if you think about it, it makes impeccable sense that they would keep pushing this narrative that, oh, it was a human-caused wildfire, and then eventually to just call them wildfires. Most of the fires that have happened here in Oregon, let alone up in Washington, and especially up in Canada recently, Western Canada, the last few years, have been consistently, they start out saying, oh, human cause, and they really quickly start just calling them wildfires. And then it's classified as a wildfire, and nobody says anything else. They don't talk about the human cause. They just say wildfire, wildfire, wildfire. But none of them, in fact, last year, not a single fire in the first 2 months of fire season in BC or Alberta were caused naturally. They were not wildfires. They called them that, but they weren't. They were human caused. Actually 2 of the biggest fires that then combined near the border with Alberta, so BC and Alberta, but that's why it's so convenient. They can just call it a wildfire. They start by saying human caused fire, quickly change it to human caused wildfire, and then the last step, wildfire. They get rid of the human part. It's literally a step-by-step progression of 3 steps. 3, that's it. Just watch, listen all year, you'll hear it. It's all of a sudden, boom, boom, boom.
We're seeing more human-caused wildfires.
There it is again. Listen to what the experience that this woman has in her position, and then refer back to her just saying exactly that, human-caused wildfires. There is literally no such thing. There never has been, there never will be. And especially when it comes down to fire causes and fires themselves, it does not coexist. It's literally an impossible thing to put together. It's incompatible.
For 8 years in the role as Commissioner of Public Lands, Hillary Franz knows wildfire risk, and this year has it.
We are predicting significant wildfire risk for the state of Washington as we head into the 2024 season.
Coming out of our El Nino winter, things are dry. The El Nino brought warmer temperatures and less moisture to the northwest, and forecast models indicate that trend will likely continue through most of summer. La Nina conditions are emerging, but the cool, wet pattern likely won't arrive in the northwest until fall. Drought conditions are present in the northern Rockies, Cascades, and even the Olympic Mountains. The drying out that started a year ago continued through winter with a much lower snowpack. Timber takes a long time to dry out and just as long to regain its moisture, meaning our forests will be more prone to wildfires this year. When timber burns, it creates the most smoke and air quality concerns, even though it's not what typically gives us the most acres burned in a year. That's grass or fine fuels. An abundance of moisture in southern Idaho and eastern Oregon this year allowed those grasses and fine fuels the ability to thrive. While that might sound like a good thing initially, those fuels typically dry out quickly in the heat of summer and ignite easily and burn quickly.
I want you to pay attention to that map. Keep that in mind, because there's a lot of contradictions with charts in this, and one of them's back to back, which is wild.
Hot, dry, windy conditions or critical fire weather days are becoming more common as our climate changes. Now more than ever, it comes down to us. The El Nino pattern responsible for warm, dry weather also means fewer storms and less lightning, so almost all of the wildfires this year will be caused by people. For Environment Northwest, I'm meteorologist Jeremy Legoux.
Let's go over now to KGW Chief Meteorologist Matt Zaffino. Matt, what's the outlook look like for Oregon this year?
Yeah, thanks, Evan. Let's set the stage, though, with the increase in the number of what we call fire weather days. Now, these are not the days where we have fires burning necessarily, but it's a combination where fire weather conditions are bad. So you need to have it hot, very dry, and very windy. And if we look at the Willamette Valley in Portland over the last 50 or so years, from 1973 to 2023, we've seen an increase in days that qualify as fire weather days by about 3, which is not.
This is the most important chart contradiction that's you're seeing the first half of it right here. Just pay attention.
Too bad, right? But again, this is on the west side of the Cascades, where we tend to have a lot of marine air, tends to keep things down, and you don't have as many fire weather days, or you have that combination of all 3: hot weather, very low humidity, and very windy conditions. Eastern Oregon, it's a different story. This is for South Central Oregon, and over that same time period, they've seen an increase of 23 days. So now we have nearly a month more days where you have it very hot, very dry, and windy. So if there is a fire, or if a fire starts, it can spread dramatically and critically and dangerously with conditions like this. So that is sort of the...
This is also like both a weirdly specific yet simultaneously ambiguous thing. South Central Oregon. How do you define that? There's multiple different ways you could look at it. It's the annoying ambiguity of how weirdly specific that region to call that is. But that's the problem with it, right? What the fuck are you saying? It's the shittiest stuff. And these charts are the cheapest, wackest shit I've seen.
Background of where we are with climate change and the
This looks like AI generated bullshit, is what it looks like. They look like they asked an AI to use certain specific terms and then just slap it there. Also, I like how this also supposedly says it's from the NOAA.
in the number of fire...
Which would mean that the NOAA is lying, because one of the two is a lie. Or maybe both are a lie. Because it would prove and mean that the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, NOAA, is putting out contradictory information and reports consistently, which is just weird.
weather days, and that's the...
Because apparently this was also NOAA, but this is the contradiction, right? Remember the Willamette Valley one saying +3 days? NOAA. Oh, that's very interesting. Look at this. NOAA. But then look at this. Right over here. This map. You got your color code. So if it's an increase, this is 7 to 14 days in the Willamette Valley instead of 3. So, these are both from the NOAA, where the NOAA, it was 1973 to 2023 before, in that last graph we saw, there's just the contradiction between these two. They claim it's +3 days. But then from also the NOAA, from 1973 to 2022, it says between 7 and 14 days. Which one is it? Make up your mind. You see how this is, it proves the lies and the bullshit that this is. It's just an agenda. It's propaganda. It's BS, because they don't even put out consistent things. They automatically contradict themselves.
that are more
It's
conducive to wild burning and critical burning. So what about our snowpack? We had a good snowpack in Oregon, unlike Washington, the Northern Rockies, where the El Nino winter created a very, very dry winter. We didn't suffer that in Oregon. Our snowpack this year.
This is an important chart too, because this is a lie. Look at this. It says we got over 40% this year, supposedly. Oh, it says to 2023. Okay, so he's saying through this year.
Was really quite good. It was average to above average for much of the state, and we don't really...
He's saying that as if it's this year, but actually no, it's 2023. Then that, okay, in that case, this is accurate, because this year, we're well below this year. We're probably somewhere around 20% to 40% less. I'd say it's probably around 30% less than average, which is bad for fire weather. Absolutely terrible. But you got to remember, because this is last year, so this is actually accurate. But again, you got to remember that he's saying this is this year's data. It's not. You see how nothing adds up. They're constantly they're bouncing themselves back and forth. They're contradicting themselves, and they're putting out this conflicting information and perspectives consistently, because that's what they want you, is to have these things planted. They're planting seeds in your head because they want you to see it and think of it in a specific way that fits an agenda. But again, you can see these things. So you can literally watch the mountains get their snowpack throughout the winter and even the spring. And last year was super interesting because you could tell which mountains got the most snow from Rainier down through Jefferson. And Jefferson got more snow than Mount Hood and Mount Adams, while St. Helens got more snow than Rainier and Mount Hood. St. Helens had the thickest, whitest, brightest coat of snow I have ever seen. It almost hid most of her features, most of her, her topography, which is super cool. It just made her look like a smooth white dome, like perfect conical dome. It was so cool. Whereas I've never seen her with that much snow before. Whereas Mount Hood looked like it had a little more snow than I normally expect, but it didn't look like that much more. I've seen it actually with a little bit more from the west side of the valley like that, in the Tualatin Valley. It's just it's really cool. But again, that is the case I was saying in the beginning, right? If you just pull back and you just observe, you'll learn and take in so much more reality and real, legitimate, 100% accurate information just by observing than you ever would and will from all the experts that are climate experts, and they're meteorological, so weather experts and atmospheric experts and so on and so forth. These people literally are being paid to push horseshit, to push lies that are sensationalized, that are hyper exaggerated or literally fabricated out of who God knows what, and then pushed and pushed and pushed by the experts and media outlets, their mouthpieces, as factual, along with governments, of course. It does fit a very specific agenda and lens. They want you to be fearful. That's the fucking point. They want you to be very afraid. Because the more afraid you are, the more easily controlled you are, the more manipulable and gullible you are, actually, as well. And the more you're going to become much more hastily exhausted and thus eventually apathetic. That's the point. And if they can get you as close as they can to pure apathy, then they can get even more control. It's just a cycle of attempts to psychologically gain as much control over people as possible, make you believe, think, and do and feel the way they want you to do, think, feel, so that way you'll even give them more control and give up some more rights for the sake of supposedly bettering the earth, environment, or humanity. This is the fucking reality of it. And it's so funny how every single time somebody mentions that, and they even give you factual proof that's literally we are living through as we speak. They can even certainly say certain things that are outright admissions, and you can literally shove the physical video or audio footage in their ears and their face, and they still reject it and say, you're a lunatic. You're a far-right crazy conspiracy theorist. It's so insane how stupid and willfully ignorant people really are. It's incredible. It's wild. There's so many other cases besides climate-related things and environment-related things that I could use as an example just by experience with observation, by living it and through it, with it, in observing it. It's just the stupidest, and people will still demand it's false and bullshit and it's exaggerated or whatever. It's like, are you fucking kidding me? How gullible really are you? It's insane. One of the things I wanted to mention as well was them in general talking about how Washington, especially Eastern Washington, has had a lack of not just snowpack and snow, it's had a lack of precipitation, it's had a lack of rain. The Cascades, especially, of Washington have had a strong lack of precipitation. Matt said that from El Nino, which is a lie. It's false. It's absolutely false. There were like two major precipitation events, the entire width of the Cascades of Washington and almost its entire length. Massive precipitation events that just like, in even a short time, almost like a monsoon type of thing, just dumped endless rain to the extent that this was two different times. They had two different sets, therefore, of massive flooding. Try telling that to the people who literally lost their homes or lost their cars, even because the cars got carried away by the fucking floods of the river, the swollen rivers and everything. And you want to fucking act, and some of them literally lost their houses. Other ones lost it because there's just too much fucking water damage and too much water inside of it. This is what happened twice. And yet they're trying to claim that they haven't had anywhere near the normal and necessary amount of precipitation. But that's clearly a lie. And it's not just those two events, obviously. Those two events had a huge impact on the amount of total precipitation that the landscapes had experienced during the winter, which, you know, it adds up. Because you're talking about total precipitation over the course of it. You're not just talking about, oh, well, you know, how many events were there or how many fronts. No, you're talking about the literal totality of the amount of precipitation you've had. On top of that, you have had ample opportunity to be able to look at the rest of the time throughout the autumn, winter, and spring. Because in the Northwest, it's late autumn through late spring is your main precipitation and snow windows. I know it's a lie because of that. On top of that, I know it's a lie because I love the outdoors. I love nature. I love all that stuff, right? So because of that, I love to watch outdoors content. And I love to especially watch outdoors content from here in the Northwest. One of my favorite people from here in the Northwest and creators, in fact, two of them. One is Samong Yang. The other one is Life Stephanie, which he goes by NWFS or Northwest Fishing Secrets. Highly recommend both of them, but especially him, by the way. Actually, both of them live east of the Cascades in Washington. And in fact, Life, for the longest time, lived west of the Cascades in the SeaTac area. Now he lives east of the Cascades on this really cool ranch/farm he has out there in the kind of around the Scablands area, but also just on the edge of the Cascades. So, you know, I watched that, and he did make stuff out throughout the winter and stuff. But he'll stop for like at least a couple of months in the winter a lot of times because of the weather, because there's either a load of precipitation or there is a hell of a lot of snow and snowpack that happens, you know, big snow events. And so he'll just stop. You know, during that period, if he has it, it's because of the weather. So you know they've gotten snow and or, you know, a good amount of snow and ice and or a good amount of precipitation. A lot of times it's both. This winter it happened. But on top of that, he was actually gone for two different periods. One was about another month for the same reason. It was weather from these two forms of precipitation. Now, you add those two together, and then you add together the times where you have seen snow, or it's snowing there, along with rain, when he has made episodes from autumn through this spring. You can actually verify, and this is high desert, obviously, so it gets way less precipitation than it does in the Cascades and west of that, both here in Oregon and obviously up in Washington State. You know that they've had a damn good precipitation winter, autumn, and spring over there in the east of Washington. Samong does these turkey walks going to turkey season. And if you know about spring turkey season, beginning of April in Washington is when spring turkey season starts. With that learned and with that known, it's just a really cool thing to keep in mind and know, like, okay, so now you know what time of year it is, including while they're hunting, and you can still see patches of snow. And this isn't even like properly in the Cascades. They're nowhere near the crest of the Cascades. They're nowhere properly within the Cascades. They're just like barely in the foothills of some smaller mountain chains. And there's still patches of snow here and there in early April. Because they're not in the Cascades and they're in not even really the foothills, that should tell you something, especially being in the high desert. It proves that there is a solid quality amount of precipitation and snow pack up in those areas. Life actually got stuck in a mud pit in the snow zone up in the patch of ridges and mountains he has just a little ways from his house, his ranch out there in the Scablands, the edge of the Scablands / edge of the Cascades, foothills of the Cascades. He got stuck. And you know when that was? Mid-April. And he got stuck. And again, it wasn't properly the Cascades or any of the bigger mountain or ridge lines at all. And he got stuck because of the mud pits left behind by the snow melt. And there was still a good amount of snowpack around. Again, that shows that what they're telling us in this video and what they're claiming to us here in the Northwest is a lie. You can prove it's an observable fact that it is a lie. And that means the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, also has been a pathological liar. This is plain and simple propaganda. And it's easily verified and provable by those of us living this experience, observing. And some of the factual proof is, in fact, again, the fact that they have no consistency and they've been contradicting themselves, including with their own output of their own graphs and charts and maps and everything else. This is exactly what I'm saying. This is exactly what I think a lot of people who are saying, no, it's a bunch of bullshit. They're not necessarily saying that climate change doesn't exist or isn't real. They're saying that the form, I guess you could say, or the way that they're saying that the climate has changed and is changing is the lie. That is what the falsehood is. That is the inaccuracy. That is the propaganda. That is the agenda. And again, if you look into the agendas behind these businesses and the people who are funding these supposed studies and charts and everything else like that, these experts, and if you look at the actual data and everything, it proves it's either entirely fabricated and that's a lie, just made up, or it is egregiously exaggerated. It's so easy to verify. That is, again, what especially people like me are saying when we're saying that. We're not saying, I'm certainly not saying, I can speak for myself here, no, climate change is obviously very real. It's a very natural cycle of the earth. Suppose you can compare it to like flower cycles, right? So it blooms once every year. Climate change is like when the flower has passed its peak of bloom and the bloom dies. Some of the leaves sometimes die and the plant dies back for the rest of the year until it comes back around to spring again, and then it pops with color again and it blooms again. That is what climate change is. It's a natural part of the rhythm and the cycle of the earth, of nature. It's always been that way. And that's exactly what's happening. If you ever get access to Gaia, I highly recommend you look for, I wish it's been years now and I don't remember, because it's a paid service. So of course I haven't seen it in years since the one time I saw it, but it was super impactful. And I highly recommend you check it out. It's basically on cycles, not just cycles of the earth and of thus climate and nature and things like this. It's also the cycle of humanity. Humans have so many cycles, and it's showing the literal data and the verified proof using history and using carbon dating, depending on which it's talking about, which cycle it is. In this case, climate change is, it's carbon dating. They literally have it charted back 4 million years now. And even then, I think it was around 3 million years. And they proved that this is 100% natural climate change event we're experiencing right now. And it is 100% on time. And it is actually wildly mild and not at all severe like they keep claiming it is. And again, it's using actual factual, proven and verified data and information that's been carbon dated and charted. And so that's why I highly recommend people look for that. Whatever keywords you can find, even if it's just Greg Bratton, and you look back years, I highly recommend you watch it, because you're gonna learn so much and you're gonna see, and it's gonna cause you to immediately make one major question, which is why the fuck does literally no one ever that's supposedly important, that supposedly knows what they're talking about on these topics, ever refer to this data? Why do they never show it? Why do they act like it does not exist? Why have I never heard and seen this before? With all the verification that they give for this, all the citations, where has this been? And why is it suppressed? Why did they act like this does not exist and it's not real? They completely ignore it. What's going on? You know, it's going to guarantee, it's going to make you immediately, with probably irritation, ask that question again and again and again. What it might lead you to go to, I don't know, the famous question of, what are they hiding? What is their angle? Why would they do that? Because you know they have to have a reason for it. So what's the angle? What do they get out of not teaching this, not sharing it? And you might start to expand on that and then start to look at it even broader and be like, okay, so what this is saying, let's look at it from this perspective of looking at this and then now looking back at everything else we're being fed, we're being sold and told, we're being shown, and see how different it is and in what ways it is, and then how severe and potentially polarized that difference is. and then try to flip ourselves back again. Listening to their narratives, listening to what they keep saying. What are the buzzwords? What are the phrases they keep echoing and repeating over and over? What are the things they keep emphasizing? And look at it from that perspective back at the other one. Because then if you do that, now you get the whole picture. And now you can start to put the pieces of the puzzle together and see why they aren't sharing the real information and why they'd be pushing their angle that they have been for years now. The oversimplified way you could put it is just follow the money as usual. But this is, yeah. And if you can't tell, I'm very impassioned about these topics because, again, I am very passionate about the earth. I am very passionate about the environment. I am very passionate about nature. I love the fuck out of it. My most dedicated goal outside of stuff for myself when it comes down to just getting a dream home / property and finally living on my own like that, and, you know, growing my own food and stuff. Outside of that, just ultimate goal, long term, I literally could not more badly want to start that organization, that group, whatever you want to call it, that is a not-for-profit volunteer organization that is technically paid volunteering, where it would literally only hire and bring on people who prove that they are genuinely impassioned. They are genuinely deeply passionate people when it comes down to wildland restoration. And that would be our entire thing, is wildland restoration, not just conservation, but emphasis on restoration back to as natural and original of a state as possible. I could not want that more. And that is my number one goal I want to do, because that way, no longer do you have to worry about being boxed out when you have a passion like I do for this stuff. Now, even legally, they can't tell you no. They have to let you do it. All of a sudden, the industry, the job industry surrounding these job descriptions, forestry, whatever it is, no longer can box us out and gatekeep us and say you have to have 2 top-level degrees and you have to have 5 to 10 years of experience in this exact job position, or else, sorry, we won't even consider you because you're not qualified. And they're wondering why they're so short-handed. They literally ask, why are we so short-handed? How can we get more people to get interested in this and actually apply for these jobs? And obviously young people, right? Because all the people that are there that qualify with those criteria are old. They're all old people. They're all retirement age or closing in on retirement age. The youngest, I think, are like 40-something-year-olds. And they are actually technically nepotized. They're nepotism. They're nepo babies in the industry. They are brought in because of the fact that they are the children of the older generations that have been working it their entire lives, and it just recycles the same families. But of course, people are having less kids, and you have that problem. And then on top of that, everybody's going tech and tech obsessed now and tech crazy. So of course, even more people are doing that. More and more people want to live in cities. They don't want to live out there. They don't want to have to commute. And then you have the idea of the greenhouse gas emissions. You believe the narratives that, oh, well, it's horrible to drive. And obviously, there's no such thing as technology or batteries for your electric vehicles that can allow you to travel 100 miles, 200, 300, 400 miles both ways into and out of mountains and hills and rugged terrain and off-road and all this other stuff, because that's going to drain your battery so much quicker, because they're only meant for normal street driving. So that's a problem. That's not viable. And plus, you might damage your car. And you don't want to do that when you're spending $100,000 on your freaking electric car, right? You can see how this is a problem, right? It's a self-fulfilling prophecy of you're never going to get the people you need. But it also is a fuck you to the industry, the job industry, because of course the rules in every job is always, you need to go to school for this, you need to go to university, so college for this, you need degrees, you need an education in it, you need experience, you need a mentor, you need a role model, you need an idol, you need this, you need that. No, you fucking don't. All you fucking need is passion. But the reason why nobody who has a deep, intense passion for something like I do for this kind of stuff, right? Nobody who has it almost ever has the means to be able to apply and live their passions. That is why the people who have the passions never actually end up in these jobs because they're gate kept out of it, and on top of that, they do not have the means, the money, the equipment, the things they need to be able to live it, to be able to do it, to apply themselves to it. And that's the saddest thing. It's very intentionally made that way. So being able to form this group, I can actually ensure that all of us people who have the passions for it give the ultimate fuck you to the jobs industry as a whole and the society as a whole, actually, and how their mentalities are around this kind of stuff. And even more so, of course, to the wildland / forestry / nature job sector, because they're so gatekeepy and they refuse to change it. They refuse to hear anything about it. They're like a fucking record label. They're so out of touch and so archaic and how they're just fucking themselves over. The jobs will go extinct and they won't have anybody to do them unless, once again, they actually stop doing this stupid shit. But it's so ingrained in the modern mind that you have to have all these gatekeeping rules where you have to go to college, or you have to go to a trade school, or you have to go to this, or you have to have this education, you have to have this degree, you have to have this diploma, you have to have this experience, you have to do this and this and that. No, you don't. All you need is a fucking passion. If you have a passion for it, you are automatically going to be a legend. You will be legendary overnight with how incredibly dedicated and good you are at your job, how knowledgeable you are, because of how incredibly impassioned you are about it. And again, that's why I'm so impassioned about these topics, right? I want to live this out to reality. I want to make it reality so that not just I, but so many other people can have the pure, ethereal joy, pride, and thrill, and happiness, and gratitude and satisfaction to say, I'm living the life I've always wanted to do and I've dreamt of doing. I'm doing what I've always wanted to do and I love it. Even if you're not making much money, it doesn't matter, because you're so impassioned with what you're doing, and it's how you're spending your time in your life, how you're living it, that matters most. And it's so fucking cool to be able to be somebody who can give the world and these people what they need. I don't care if it's niche in a small minority of us. It's necessary, and I can't wait to be able to finally fucking do that. Finally say fuck you to society and the world. It's so needed, man. And that's why I'm very, very impassioned about these kind of topics, if you can't tell. I'm even giving myself even more laryngitis because I'm also not drinking because I ran out of water a while ago, and I'm very impassioned about it. But I'm also trying to keep myself restricted, because if it got even louder and bolder, well, I'd be waking up the fucking world. So, because it's late. It's basically midnight, so I digress. Anyway, fuck all these experts who keep lying and fear-mongering to push an agenda. They're liars, and at least I am willing to stand alone by myself if push comes to shove in life, knowing I know the truth. It is what it is.